Yeah, you're on. You're here. I don't know why that's there.
Okay.
And then there's this. I don't know why it does all these things, but.
And we obviously don't want to snooze it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So we did say from the first session that till the fifth session there will be some dwindling down. Now, of course, I understand that the sanitary situation is what it is. So we have 1 hour here to cover a lot of ground for the very last session. So I thank you for your patience. This is going to be, I'm not saying your patience, but actually I'm going to have to, this is going to have to go at another rhythm than what we've done before. So obviously I'll try also to just skip certain things in order for us to reach the right grounds. That's what I say. So this is the fifth session, and we talked now about different aspects of Shmot HaElokim. And today we're going to start with a name that some of you may know, some of you may not know, but it's actually a very central name to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At the beginning, it may sound to you as being a name of a malach and not being the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we actually have what to prove that it is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you will see we'll have some sources that were medieval commentators on the Gemara, but actually since then we've had holy masters like Rabbi Yirmiyahu the Arizal himself here in Tzfat, and we actually had quite a sense of what's written in the Zohar, which uses and talks about this Shem. So what Shem am I talking about? I'm talking about the Shem which starts with the same gematria, the same value as this famous Shem Eke that we talked about a lot, which is Aleph He Yud Ke, right? That we talked about a lot. Why? Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered the question of Moshe Rabbeinu about, so what should I tell them? What's your name? And he answered this famous Eke or Aleph He Yud Ke Asher Aleph He Yud Ke, and then this pasuk goes again and says, "You will tell them." Right? Aleph Ke Yud Ke sent me. Right? That's what you will tell them. Now, we saw many subtleties about that, and I'm not going to go over many of them, but some of the interesting, I think that are let's say very useful matters that we reach at different points. I will refer back to them at different time during this shiur, since I understand this is the last one. Now, so what is this Shem? It starts with the letters Aleph, Chaf, just like 21, just like Shem Eke. But it continues with Tav, Resh, Yud, Aleph, Lamed. So inside there you can see Keter being written. It starts with Aleph, and then it's finished by Yud, Aleph, Lamed. Now, anyone who really knows about Shmot of angels will imagine that this is the name of an angel. And we actually have an interesting tradition about this. And the tradition of my masters is that the reason why the pasuk in Parashat Shemot was starting back saying Ko Tomar is because Tomar, Tav, Aleph, Mem, Resh has this gematria of 641, which if you add it to 21 of Shem Eke, you get 662, which is 662 is the gematria of this special Shem I'm talking to you about now, which is Aleph, Chaf, Tav, Resh, Yud, Aleph, Lamed. which we usually call Akat, in order not to pronounce the name. And this is really a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now you will tell me, well, how do you know it's the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Well, first, before I give you justification for that, we have a beautiful, really an exquisite teaching in the Gemara, in the beginning of Maseret Brachot. It says, Tanya, who was talking the Baraita, Amar Rabbi Yishmael ben Misha. פעם אחת נכנסתי להקטיר קטורת לפני ולפנים. So in other words, there's an expression here about going inside, so לפני ולפנים. It's in the way of talking about like the inner of the inner. In other words, when is that happening? On Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha was a Kohen Gadol at the point of Beit Sheni, the second temple. And he went in the inside of the Holy of Holies to burn incense. And we will talk just a little bit about when is that happening actually, just beyond the fact that it's Kippur. I mean, you can deduce that it is Kippur. I'll let the deduction to yourself, though I'll say just in a few words, when is it that you would have the incense being burned in the Holy of Holies? Okay, and that's Kippur. That's like Judaism 101. Okay. But those that didn't follow the first course. Anyway, and it says variety, and it says Aleph Chav Tav Resh Yud Aleph Lamed Yudke Hashem Tzevakot. It's written as Gemara. You know, it's not like Zohar. Or this is Gemara. And it says Vehu Yoshev Al Kiseh Ram Venisa, and he's sitting on a very high and lofty throne. Amar li, and he said to me, Ishmael Beni, Ishmael, my son, Barecheni, bless me. Amarti lo, I said to him, Yeh ratzon milefanecha, shirbeshu rachamecha et kaasecha, that your mercy shall conquer your anger, uyagulu rachamecha al midotecha, and that your mercy overcome your attributes generally, utitnaheg im banecha bemidat rachamim. Utikanes lahem lifnim mishurat hadin, that you would actually go beyond just your boundary of judgment, go more inside. And he nodded to me with his hand. Now, this Baraita in the Gemara, what does it come to answer? It comes to answer a very perplexing question, which is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu prays. That there's such a concept as God himself praying. Now you might ask, how is that, right? Because hitpa'el, right? Hitpalel is a hitpa'el. It's a reflexive action. You do it in yourself. So you would say that you would pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you understand. Okay. But what does it mean that God himself prays? Well, in any way, when you are praying, you are in a way doing this reflexive action. You're doing this action on yourself, right? So if you yourself are doing this reflexive action, why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot himself do that? Of course, when you think about prayer, you think about praying too, right? So what does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is praying? To whom is he praying? You know, I mean, what does it mean? So of course, you know from the verb, as we just said, that he prays to himself. Now, this revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually praying, this revelation taking place through the name Akat, Aleph Chav Tav Resh Yud Aleph Lamed, is something which is actually fundamental to a tradition, is fundamentally written in the Torah. You see, there are psukim that are profoundly badly understood. And now, yes. So First, do you pray because you need something? Well, that's what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't do that. The whole matter is this, prayer is avodato shel makom. It is literally, it is the work of the omnipresent. So you're not here actually to go, any worker goes to work, and he comes and he barely started the work and he tells his boss, by the way, there's this and this I need. What will the boss tell him? Get the job done. We'll talk about your salaries issues, your anything that you have a problem with. We'll talk about it, later on. But there's a work to do here. Get the work done. Right? And that's what happens with tefillah. Tefillah is avodato shel makom. You're not here to come with your request about this, what you did that you need at that point. You may use other times. By the way, we have a tradition about this, that the right time for coming with request to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, though it is related to your tefillah, is tefillat arvit, which is why our sages said that it's called tefillat reshut. Mari, arvit. It's tefillat reshut, in the sense that this is the only tefillah which is actually yours. It's actually yours to do.
That's why you're so tired.
Well, and that's why starting your tefillat arvit is actually the best time at the point of the beginning. I'm not even saying the Shemona Esrei. At the point you start your tefillat arvit is the best time to come up with your own bakashot, your own needs.
Is that different than Shabbat Yibunu?
Well, it is another matter. What did we see? We saw this happen 2 weeks. No, just ask. What is the original expression of Hibudidut? Yashav badad v'yidom ki natal alav. Megillat Echa. And we saw it used in Pirkei Avot about talking about what? About Esek Torah, about really meditating, contemplating Torah. You are contemplating Torah at that point. When you're contemplating Torah at that point, are you there to come to Bakashot? Not really. You're there to go on a higher plane, to talk, to relate to things that are of this higher nature. And so that's what Hibudidut is. Hibudidut originally should be relating to Torah, relating to higher thoughts, drawing down chokhmah, wisdom, and that's what Hibudidut is all about. We're talking about Bakashot. Now, to come back to our subject, so let's assume, that's what's written in the Gemara, and there's not even any other opinion. This is not given, and there's no machloket on it. So they weren't discussing it. Maybe it shocks you in a way, but that's what's written in the Gemara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself prays. Okay. And what is this associated with this name, which is called Aleph, Rav, Tav, Resh, Lamed? Now you have another example of that concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu relating to his own self. And that's at the point of the Yagmidot. That is the 13 attributes that are being recited. I hate the term, that's what's going on. Of saying, Kel, Rahum, Wahanun. So there is this type of Jewish lore, right? This type of misunderstanding, which is so common that by the end, when everyone is convinced that that's what's going on, is that it's Moshe Rabbeinu who actually sees that, taking place. So much that even certain individuals came to the point that when they say the Yagmidot, themselves they bow, because they think that Vayavor, Al Panav, that it's actually Moshe Rabbeinu that somehow, in a way, went on his face. But the Psukim don't say that. And even, I just chose one out of many others that I would have at home, but even our good friends in Art School in New York, they don't fool themselves in the translation. Only that for some reason, there is this thing about thinking that it's Moshe Rabbeinu. Here's what the Pasuk says. Vayered Hashem be'anan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu came down, went down in the cloud. Beautiful metaphor, beautiful imagery. Some of you may know Pirkei Avot de Rabbi Natan, which starts with that. That is, Pirkei Avot that we have usually starts with this whole matter of the transmission. Torah was transmitted, etc. And Pirkei Avot de Rabbi Natan starts directly with Moshe Rabbeinu and clothed himself in the cloud, and he saw what he saw inside the cloud. That's how Pirkei Avot de Rabbi Natan starts. Now, the pasuk says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu descended in the cloud. Vayityatzeb imo sham. Now he stationed himself with him there. Now you could say, oh, it's Moshe Rabbeinu who stationed himself with him there. Right? But if you look at any of the oldest commentaries, including looking at Targum Onkelos, you'll find out that no one was of this opinion. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself who stations himself in the cloud. With who is with him? With Moshe, who went in the cloud. Vayikra b'shem Hashem. So we say, this time, Vayikra b'shem Hashem, he called in the name of Hashem. That's Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Wrong. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself who calls with his name. And there isn't, by the way, there isn't any of the original opinions, whether it's Targum Onkelos, whether it's in the Gemara, whether it's whether it's Rashi, that says the contrary to that. No one says the contrary to that. Only people in their right mind or their wrong mind today actually come and absolutely want to say, it's Moshe who called the name of Hashem. No, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who calls on his name. And that's the tefillah. And that's what we're talking about, Shem Hashem. And what takes place at that point? It says, Vayavor Hashem al panav. Whoever thought it could be about Moshe? Well, it's written, Vayavor Hashem al panav. Who's the subject of the verb? Hashem. Is there any other possibility? No. But you see, our problem is that we have a hard time thinking. What does it mean? What in the world does it mean? We have a secret behind Vayavor. Our sages told us that it's made of letters Ab, Ain and Bet, and Rayu, Resh Yudvar, Vayavor. Why? Because you have in this parasha, Parashat Beshalach, you have 72 names of HaKadosh Baruch. And those 72 names are each one made of 3 letters. And 3 times 72 is 216, which is Rayu, Resh Yudvar. So Vayavor is here to tell you, it's like alludes to that, to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself was making usage of his own names. And that's what it's saying, Vayikra b'shem Hashem. And so, of course, as on a set of lectures on series of lectures on Shemot HaElokim, I couldn't avoid mentioning the Shemot, and it comes up here in Parashat Beshalach. So I'm absolutely delighted that that's the way the timing is. But then, how do we know that this Shem Akat that we mentioned, Aleph Kav Tav Resh Yud Aleph Lamed, is not the name of an angel? Of course, you had many opinions that said so. Rabbi Hananel said that it is the name of Allah. But you've had a later commentary, which is called the Arlozoroff, which made a very, very fine observation. First, it says, if it's lifnai lifnim, it's really inside, and it's to the ketoret, it can only be on Yom Kippur. And you have in Parashat HaHaremot, so in Sefer Vayikra, you have this very interesting statement that at the point, that the Kohen Gadol provides atonement, that no person shall be present in the Ohel Moed. It's clearly written. That's Torah, the Oraita. There is in the Ohel Moed, at the point that the Kohen Gadol does atonement, there is no person, of course, part for the Kohen Gadol, but no individual is present there. The Talmud Yerushalmi extends that understanding. The Talmud Yerushalmi says in Maseret Yoma, what does it mean? What does it mean, no person? The Kohen Gadol is not a person, he's inside there, right? So what does it mean? There's no person in the Olam Moed at the point that Kohen Gadol does, provides the autonomy. It says it means that there is no malach inside there. That's what it means. There's no person. It means that at that point, that's the point where we are absolutely certain that there's only the Kohen Gadol and there isn't anything apart from Hakadosh Baruch Hu and the Kohen Gadol, and there isn't a malach inside there. And that's how we know that this tradition of Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha Kohen Gadol going inside the Holy of Holies and seeing Aleph, Kaf, Tav, Resh, Yud, Aleph, Lamed. That's how we know it is actually Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and it is actually the name of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Now, of course, this is not our only source, but this is our original proof of how we know. And the later developments of or drawing down of wisdom in our people, and in particular the Zohar, has expressed it. And the Arizal himself in Shalom Rashbi and Parshat Truma says clearly that Akat is actually a name of Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
How is it written in the Pasuk? An Isham or an Adam Sham?
You'll have to look in Achremot. I have to find back the. I'll tell you the Pasuk. It's Vayikra 16:17. Okay, 16:17. It's a good question.
You know where in Yoma?
It's Yoma Perek Chamesh Halacha or Mishnah Bet, because you know that the Yerushalayim we don't have a well-established pagination, because we don't know exactly.
And also the Brachot you mentioned earlier?
Brachot 7a. And so here the question we really have is, okay, let's accept it. Shemakat is the name of the book. But then how does it correspond to what we looked at in the past weeks? Well, I'm not going to develop that very long, but I can tell you something that you can yourself visualize, which is something quite profound. Is you can visualize them, just giving it to you the order of words for you to see. So you would have like Shem Eke, Aleph, Ke, Yud, Ke, Aleph, Ke, Yud, Ke, Asher, Aleph, Yud. So that, who can discuss that? That's the name of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, it was given that. Above each Shem Eke, you would have an Aleph. And then you have another Shem Kodesh under. And that Shem Kodesh is Aleph, Waw, Chaf, Tzat. It is the adbash of the word Tefillah, Tav Pe Lamed. Aleph, Waw, Chaf, Tzat. The Tzadi and the Aleph make together the 91 that you all know through the, Psukim like Poter et Yadecha, Pe Aleph, Yud, know as one of the Abshemot also, which is the same Gematria, Samer Aleph Lamed, which corresponds also to Shem Havaya and Shem Adonut together. Yud, Aleph, He, Daled, Wav, Nun, Ke, Yud, which corresponds to 26 and 65. 26 and 65 gives you together this 91. It corresponds to this Aleph, which is the first letter of this Shem Kodesh I mentioned, and then the Tzadi at the end. And then the middle, what you have, Wav and Chaf, which is Shem Havaya Baruch Hu. And why am I mentioning this? Because that was the old way of visualizing, of thinking this Shem Akat, Aleph Chav Tav Resh Yud Aleph Lamed. That's the way they would think it. They would think Eke Asher Eke, this Aleph and this Aleph, and this Aleph Wav Chav Tzadi. That's how they would meditate on it. Now, you might tell me, well, that's pretty complicated, or that's, what do you want me to do with this? Well, I actually don't want you to do anything with this, but I'm mentioning it only so that you get a sense of the bigger picture. And so what is the generic name that the Malach could have? If you say that this Aleph, Chav, Tav, Resh, Yud, Aleph, Lamed, which we consider as Shem Akat, which we consider as actually as Hakadosh Baruch Hu, if you say it's not the name of a Malach, then what is the generic name for Malachim, right? And where is the difference being made? Now you have a teaching in the Zohar. Not any place in the Zohar. This was the part that spoke the most to my master, and I can say that actually that's one of the parts that spoke the most to the Arizal himself, which is my master's name?
Yeah. I would love to know because
Saba Avraham ben Saadia Iraki HaKohen Al-Usta. Oh. So here is this teaching. It's in Parashat Mishpatim, in the Zohar. And it starts by saying, Ushma Chad Mikol Shar Shemahan Dili. And there is one name from all his other names. So I had to reserve this teaching for the last session. There is one name out of all his other names. Hahud it Pashat, that spreads, expands, or it Pelag, that branches or bifurcates. Lechama Achin Ushvilin, to many ways and paths. Weikre Elohim. And this is about the fundamental nature of this name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Shem Elohim, by which the Torah starts. Bereshit bara Elohim. It says, V'ahasin Shemada, and he bestowed this very name. We it pelag, it was distributed letatae dehai alma, to the lower realms of the world. So in other words, the only name that we know for certain, and that's not just this Zohar, which is fundamental teaching, but it's what even Diari developed from there, and it has been a tradition, is that the only name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that goes in the lowest of realms of this world, in other words, which isn't just belonging to a higher place, but goes into even the lowest places, that is even to me, even here, is Shem Elohim. And I know that for most of you, you maybe have never heard this, so you think, what in the world is he telling us? But this is, this is the Zohar. This is Sabbat Mishpatim. This is Parashat Mishpatim of the Zohar. And this is such a fundamental teaching by the Sabbat Mishpatim that actually appeared in Sefer Chaim and Kitvei Ari countless times. No, you have assumed that Shem Havaya Baruch Hu reaches it. You have assumed that. I'm not here to answer why not. But I would ask you, why yes? How did you assume that so easily?
Because Hashem is everywhere.
Yeah, you don't think that Shem Elohim is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu?
It's Hashem's life. It's not like that. Alive.
And so you think that Shem Havaya Baruch Hu has to be the generic name that appears everywhere?
No, I think all of Hashem's names would be everywhere.
No, that's why actually the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we mentioned, Akat, Aleph Tav Tav Resh Yud Aleph Lamed. In Kabbalah, we look at it as being corresponding to certain of the higher structures. And he is not called by that name in the lower realm. And for certainly not in a place where there's only Shmot, where there are only Shmot Elohim, where there's only Shem Elohim. And why am I saying Shmot Elohim? You see, that goes back to the first original question. Why do we talk about plurality even in the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Because there are 120 permutations of the letters of Shem Elohim. There are 5 letters. It gives you 120 permutations. And those 120 permutations have different roles, and they're all, as the Ari himself says, they're all holy. There's no question about it. But, and that I'll let the Zohar continue the explanation, and you will understand where the but is, where the exception is. We'it pelag shemada leshamashin welimemanan deminhage lishat amin. And it was apportioned, this name, Shem Elohim, to the attendants, the appointees, in other words, the angels, the sarim, the princes of nations that are ruling on the rest of the people. You see, Shem Havaya Baruch Hu is not about the universality of what the revelation of Torah and Sinai. Shem Havaya Baruch Hu is, as the Zohar cites, not just here, but many other places, is a unique name for unique people. Shem Havaya Baruch Hu is a name that corresponds to us as Am Yisrael. Ki chalek Hashem amo. The chalek, the part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, is not the rest of the people, not the rest of the nations. But on the other hand, if you want a universal name, that does correspond to anyone. Anyone can refer to him as being God. Who is it? Shem Elohim. And this is exactly the reason why we saw last week that Rabbi Meir Ba'anes, when he gave this guard, who is a non-Jew, a Roman guard, when he gave him away out of the trouble that he could face in trying to free his sister-in-law, what did he tell him? Elaha de'meir amin. But you see, Aleph Lamed, the He Aleph, is a form of Shem Elohim. He's not going to tell him, you're going now to refer to, to an abstract name that actually doesn't have nothing to do with you, as long as you're a non-Jew. I'll go back to that just in a little while. The Zohar continues and says, Kema dat amer, as it is said, and he cites psukim from Torah. Wayavo Elokim el Bilam Laila. It's a fascinating pasuk. You know why? Because Bilam, just before he said he's going to consult HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what did he say? He came with this extraordinary pretense. He said, I'm going to talk to Havaya, to Shem Havaya, to Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what he says. It's written in the Torah. But by the end, the Tachlis, what happens to him? Who comes to him? Shem Havaya. Is it written again in Torah? No. It's written who comes to him? Shem Elohim. You see? The Torah, in other words, has been already giving you this lesson since long. Only that people are not ready to listen to it. They prefer the pretense of Bilam, who's saying, I'm going to talk to Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, and you say, oh yeah, great, go talk to Hashem. And you don't even look at the pasuk that follows, which contradicts his own word. You see, it's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu talked to him. You can say, oh, well, in a way, Shem Elohim, it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I agree, but it is not HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Shem Havaya. Because it's on a lower form. It's on matters that are there at the level which is even an impurity. Do you imagine that Bilam would be this pure, wonderful, holy prophet, holy man, that actually who is here and talking to the divine like Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai? I mean, where did you confuse things here? I mean, what's going on? It's one thing to say that Bilam was for the nations, what Moshe Rabbeinu was for us. It's another to imagine that the type of level of like inner worlds, of inner access, that Bilam is getting the same inner access that Moshe Rabbeinu was getting. I mean, of course not. Because if yes, you would have a big problem. And I can go on about what is the sort of Bilam, which is something that the Ari himself talks about, and which is something absolutely beautiful, essential actually. But you would have a big problem. And the Zohar continues and says, "Vayavu Elohim el Avimelech b'chalom halayla." Again, another one that doesn't merit to actually have Shem Havaya Baruch Hu talking directly to him. Whereas if you look all the psukim around, everything talks about Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, but suddenly you have Shem Elohim. That's the reason it's cited like that in the Zohar. And it says, V'chen kol memana umemana de'achasin lon kudesha belechu lish'ar amin bishma da kvilan. It says, all appointees, so we call it sarim, princes, whatever you call them, all appointees that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed on the rest of the nations through this name of Shem Elohim, they are included. They are included. That is, the appointees themselves. We say, and we commonly say, I consider it as a very correct statement, that on each nation you have a Sar. On each nation you have a prince. And as we know, you had Saro Shel Sar. Each nation you had that. Shara Gilgulim goes even further. It tells you that on every type of hill, you have a hill, there's a Sar. On every stream, there is a Sar which is appointed. Appointed by whom? By HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously. These are not independent, but they've been appointed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, very interestingly, you have a stream down that the Arabs used to call Kar'ach. If you look on the old maps, they write as Kar'ach. And you look in Shara Gilgulim, and you see that the Ari describes this as Kar'el. And there's a simple reason. Is that the Arabs were calling it by a certain name that corresponded to certain characteristics they've seen. But the Ari called it by the name of the Sar that was ruling on the street. And that's how you should call things. One of the things that I have to tell you that I'm very disappointed with my own self and with ourselves. Till now, I've been done Aliyah, I remember how many years already. And you see those mountains and those extraordinary places and those, those holy places. Each and every place here in this Eretz Israel is holy. And you actually don't even know the name of this place. And it hits me each time because I'm thinking, look, in the Alps, we knew each little, peak, each little, piece of rock. We had a name for it and we knew them, It's been the same. We've done this everywhere we've been, In India, we've had the same thing. Each and everything, we knew the names. And you come here and you're in Artzinu Akdosha, in Eretz Israel, and you look at this extraordinary land, and you can't even name things. Of course, you have maps that have like modern names. Yes.
Is being able to have a revelation of the is that dependent on the Kodesh? Is that what differentiates it?
The potential. Brit Kodesh is only about the potential. It doesn't mean there's automatic inheritance.
No, obviously there's the criteria.
It's the first criteria. It's the first criteria. Yes, the first criteria.
There has to be no order.
Yes, but it's like the beginning.
That is true for women.
Well, here is the matter. It's
Meaning like a non-Jewish woman also wouldn't have access to the Torah.
Here's the matter. I'll ask you the question, upside down. Does a Jewish woman automatically have access to the Torah?
So I'm asking again. I would think it's for men, depending on the level of.
Well, actually, both for men and for women, both Jewish men and women don't have direct access to the Torah. There's a matter that we call, I don't want to go into all details, but that we call Mochin de Galut, which is related to Shema Avoyabah. The Ari has the statement in Shara Akdamot in saying that Mochin de Galut are accessible only l'tzorer tefillah. It's only because we have a need for praying that inside our prayer, mentioning Shemawaya Baruch Hu and those elements that we could call this Mochin de Galut, very hard to translate. It's a certain level which corresponds to Shemawaya Baruch Hu. At that level, it's only because we have the need for tefillah that we actually have access. And outside of tefillah, absolutely not. No, obviously not. Obviously not. And actually, it's not even Krishna for the art. It's actually doing his work. You see, to take the parallel we had before, with a worker that comes to his job, he is participating into something. You know, what's a good boss? What's a good, right? What's a good leader? It's someone who knows to himself do the little job, right? I mean, we've seen it. I mean, I've seen it in many companies I've been in. And when you have some type of a managerial chief, you know, some type of manager that has no clue on how to do the work of the little fellow down, he's not a good manager. You know, he's terrible because he has no clue what needs to be done and how it's getting done, etc. Well, here it's the same thing. You have to realize that everything you need to do in Tefillah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it, of course, but at the supernal level. And he's just including you inside his own avodah. That's why we call it avodato shel makom. It is his work of the omnipresence. Only that he gives you a part. He tells you, you know what? You know, take care of this little gluing that you need to do here, or this little fixing here and there, do this and that. But he just includes you inside his own work. You know, it's not that you are doing something that without you doing it, that you know nothing takes place. No, it's already taking place. No, it's just that he wants to include you inside his work. Now, you have a second question?
Yeah, when did we start and why did we start to give people names of Hashem, like Shalom and Michael, names of Hashem and names of Melachim?
I can answer that just after this session, but actually it refers back to the very pasuk in the Torah, which it says about that they started to call people B'Shem Hashem. You have a pasuk that goes like that in the very beginning of Bereshit, and that's from that point. So you can actually see the generations, you know, from before and generations after, and that's where you have a difference. But let's continue just what's written in the Zohar. So he says, "Ve'afilu avodah zarah," and even avodah zarah, bishma da'ikri, is also called by that name, Shem Elokim. That's the reason why you have it in the Shema. Right? We talk about the fact of not bowing to Elokim Acharim. Right? So you do see that it's called by that name. And it's a fundamental question, really. What is avodah zarah? Is it just a shtut? You know, is it like some type of idiocy, some type of ridiculous thing, like someone who has a misunderstanding of saying he thinks that this is God? Obviously, this is not God. So like he's an idiot. But we call his thing avodah zarah. And I have to tell you that that point of view is very much, I would say, foreign to us. It's actually a point of view which is very Christian and very Muslim. They both have had this thing of thinking that the oneness of God meant that if you would think that there is any power or anything of validity, anything that is of any worth spiritually into anything, that this is just a misunderstanding. This is obviously that these people just like misunderstood everything. They should have just referred to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not to that, and there's nothing by it. Now, of course, it's very reassuring to think like that. Why? Because then you say the people who were adoring the sun, right? They obviously should be adoring the creator of the sun. And that statement is right. But on the other hand, to think that there is no power in the sun is ridiculous. Like, what's that light you have outside? You know what I mean? What are those solar panels you have? You know, what is this dut shemesh that everyone uses in the summer here? There's no power behind it. Of course, there's a power. Is it the ultimate power? Of course not. But to simplify things to the point of saying, you know, anyone who's been thinking that there is something divine about the sun, this is like ridicule. Of course, in a way, it's ridicule when you know that there's a much higher power. On the other hand, it is what's called in Hebrew El. Aleph Lamed originally has the name is for saying a power. And even in the Mizmorim, we look in Sefer Tehillim, a few times David HaMelech uses the term Aleph Lamed to just, you say a power. When he says, that you have a power in your hand to do. Kel beyadecha la'asot. Does it actually mean that God is in your hand to do? No, of course not. It's saying that there's a power in your hand to do. So originally, the name Aleph Lamed is really what it refers to the existence of a power. That is, in the old times, one would not have talked about this as being Chashma. Obviously, as you know, it's a usage of a certain term in Sefer Yecheskel, which has been taken to talk about something more. But one was not supposed to talk like that. One could talk about, Aleph Lamed for power of something which could talk about Kel Or, for example, the power which is behind light, or things like that. But you will not talk in a way which is abstract like that. People use Chashma today. Because, by the way, there's nothing that shows that this has anything to do with Chashma in any sort of way. It doesn't matter. So where is this leading us? Well, you see, this teaching in the Zohar continues and says, Ushmada Malach al Goyim. And this name of Shem Elokim, this is what reigns on nations. Velo hahu shemada hahu de Malach an Israel, and not the very name that rules on Israel. Now, I know that for most of you, what I just said now is a statement that you maybe never heard. But actually, this is fundamentally Parashat Mishpatim in the Zohar, and we can even say the most respected source of teachings for the Ari himself.
Israel is Yashar Kev, so we're getting direct current.
No, you certainly know what Israel means to say. Israel means to say that, that's written, it's a sin and not a shin. It's to say that Am Israel makes of Hakel, makes of God himself their son. They make of God himself their kids. That's a characteristic that anyone else would take any other power, any other matter, and say, you know what, that's my God. No, we make of Hakel the son. That's the name Israel. And it says, De'yuhu Yechida'a, Le'ama Yechida'a, a unique name for unique people. Le'ama d'Israel, Ama Kadisha, for the people of Israel. Now, last week, we talked about this bakasha given to the guard. We look at it like a formula. And I humbly mentioned a kavanah could have, an intention. So, we could have had another lecture really on all the verbs, the terms that are used to talk about a name. There's one thing which is lechawen, to actually have an intention. It's actually to direct. But you have many other terms, in Hebrew. And we saw the term rayon, which is of the root resh ayin he, which is about a thought. We also saw last week about in the Mishnah, who uses the term in Sefer Malachi, which is Choshev Shemo, the ones that think his name. You have different terms like that are all different ways of referring, of actually using, employing, considering the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We talked about also with Techu Becha Yodeh Eshemecha. This time it's about knowing his name. Each time is a different type of action, a different type of way of relating to the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what we saw last week, which is something which unfortunately is rarely said, is that The statement Elaha Demir Amin is wonderful, extraordinary, except for everything you want, anything you want, any way you want to qualify it, but it is not sufficient. And that's what I was just mentioning last week. Sufficient. Not enough. And why? Because we were supposed to actually have a certain intention. What is that intention we're supposed to have? First, it's written Elaha, an Aleph at the end. Elaha Demir Anin. And the intention is that you should think what we call Elokim de Alefim. That is, you develop Shem Elokim. And again, that's the reason it was given to a Roman guard. I'm not saying that Rabbi Meir himself gave him that intention, but between us, between Jews, as we actually want to relate something which corresponds to the teaching of Rabbi Meir, it corresponds to this Aleph Lamed Pe, Lamed Mem Dalet, He Aleph, because we develop it in Aleph, Yud Wav Dalet, Mem Mem. And if you want, you can write it for yourself. Aleph Lamed Pe, Lamed Mem Dalet. Lamed Mem Dalet, He Aleph, because it's the Alephim. That's the reason it's written Elaha Demir. He Aleph, Yud Wav Dalet, Mem Mem. You develop Shem Elokim in Alephim. And so having the intention of that name, while saying Elaha Demir, that was a secret of what Rabbi Meir and Balanese did. And you see where it's wonderful is that it actually was here to come as an answer to the damage of using recklessly the 42-letter name. And as we said, the 42-letter name actually has exactly the same gematria as what I just told you to consider. That is Elokim de Alefin, which corresponds to 291, which we usually call Aretz. And then this Elaha Demir Anin. And if you add all those letters together, it gives you the same sum as if you would add up all the letters of the 42-letter name that I mentioned just last week, that we call in Kabbalah Mab Desak. Now, we said last week that Avraham Avinu knew to access that. And that's the reason that it says, it's written, Vaikra Beshem, Hawaya, so Shem Yud Kevavke, El Olam. And I mentioned just last week that if you do again the gematria of Hawaya El Olam, with the Mem Sofit as 600, you will see that exactly the same gematria as this 42-letter name. It's exactly the same gematria as this Elokim de Alefin with the Elaha Demir Anen. But you see, as we mentioned even from the first shiur, David HaMelech, any of those things, right? He knew. And he has his own ways of encoding it. The way of encoding it for David HaMelech was to say, Ve'ohavei shemo yishkenuva. And the ones who love his name will dwell in her. The ones who love his name will dwell in her. And if you do the gematria of Ve'ohavei shemo yishkenuva, it has exactly the same, very same gematria that we mentioned. And it's in the very end of the Mizmor 69. So Tehillim, Sefer Tehillim 69, the very end. Ve'ohavei shemo yishkenuva. And the ones who love his name will dwell in her. And which corresponds to, again, this 663, which corresponds to all those names. Now, just have only a few minutes left. And I'll mention something which may sound even more difficult to hear than what I said about Shmot. But it's fine, because it's the end of the sessions. So if you don't like what I'm going to say now, it's okay. You won't have to hear me in the next session. That's fine. Now, we said that Avraham Avinu had this sense even about this 42-letter name, because that's the reason he calls to El Hawaya El Olam. On the other hand, we also know that he gave his other sons, than Yitzchak, gifts. Now you have a teaching, that's the pasuk at the very end of Parashat Chayei Sarah. You have a teaching of the Ari, which actually stems from Maseret Sanhedrin 91a, where you have this great Amora, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyahu bar Abba, Melamed shemasar lahem shem tum'ah. So he's telling you what are those matanot, what are those gifts that Abraham gave to his other sons, which is written Me'al Yitzchak beno. In other words, it's like he passes around Yitzchak. He doesn't give those things to Yitzchak, but he gives to the Bnei Pilakshim. He gives them those matanot. And so you have this teaching, this very old teaching, that dates from the time of the Amoraim, which says, so what are those matanot he gave them? And he says, Shemasar lahem shem tum'ah. He gave them shem tum'ah. So literally, a name of impurity. It's not written shem tameh, an impure name. It says shem tum'ah, like the name of impurity. So you have a famous commentary of Rashi and many other commentaries around that, the same theme. We're telling you that he actually gave them the shemot behind sorcery, the shemot behind demonology, the shemot. Sorry? Thank you. So I agree with you. In fact, that's the next thing you should ask, which is a contradiction, or at least let's put it this way. You have written in few dapim, like about 40 dapim earlier in Maseret Sanhedrin, that there was a debate among the sages, is Avodah Zarah including sorcery? And is sorcery in a way prohibited, permitted, yes or no, to the nations? That is, you take your average non-Jewish Joe, can he practice sorcery, yes or no? Now, you've had different answers to that. And on this daf of Maseret Sanhedrin, then the later sages, the Tosafot, are saying, obviously, since Rashi says that he would have given them ways of sorcery, Rashi must be of the opinion then that sorcery was allowed to non-Jews. Right? Because if not, why would Avraham Avinu start giving those type of things, to his children, giving them, in other words, to commit sins, right? To give them sinful practice. Why would you do that? Avraham Avinu didn't do that. Now you have many other ways of relating to this story. But since we were just exactly 59 minutes at the moment we started, I am going to tell you a very beautiful commentary, which is very rare, which tells you, the type of chokhmah you have inside there, and which you already heard, I'm certain that you know on the Torah, there's a commentary called the Siftei Chachamim. And the Siftei Chachamim have this beautiful commentary. They don't ascribe to the whole idea that he gave them ways to sorcery, to do this and that. It says, Shem Sherashaim Leaskiro Betumah. So here is the way he explains Shem Tumah. He says this is a name by which they can address him in a state of Tumah. In other words, not anymore saying this thing of Abraham Avinu gave them, impure stuff like, I don't know, some type of demonology, some type of ways to address demons and this and that, and good luck with that. And good luck with explaining that, right? Now, you can explain it if you're of the ones that, in Maseret Sanhedrin, I think it's something like that, the dapim earlier, which consider that sorcery is actually allowed for non-Jews. So then in that case, you say, well, that's what you give them. On the other hand, as a matana, what type of matana is that? What type of thing is that? You give them something to do some of the very dirty matters, so that they will be powerful. But don't you want to give them some sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of relating to him?
They're not that level.
Well, yes, they're not that level. But on the other hand, try to put yourself in the shoes of Abraham. You are having these children, you send them away. And they're not going to come back, they're not going to have much contact of anything. Nothing. It's like you send them, it's finished. What are you going to give them? You're going to tell them, look, what all the other nations think is the right thing. You're going to bow down to the sun. You're going to do this and that, consider this and that. Or you're going to tell them about the fundamental truths that will give them some link. Obviously, you're going to give them some link. Any parent would do that. So much the more Avraham Avinu. Well, because they were in the land of Tumah. Because they're in a place where there's also a lot of Tumah. There's a lot to comment on that actually, but please.
How do you understand the word Tumah? In that sense, that this will come together. It's hard to put it together because it's coming out of Kedusha, but wasn't it maybe?
Well, here's the matter. You have Dapim and Maseret Brachot, which are talking about different states of men and women. So I don't want to detail them. But which tell you that in those states, one is not supposed to even mention the Shema. One is not even to think the Shema. So you have all kind of different states of Tum'ah that people can find themselves in, particularly when they've not been given means to purify themselves. Right? Now, we ourselves, we like to be, unfortunately, very prideful about, we were given the Torah, so we have all this, as if we don't know any of that Tum'ah. But the fact is, since we can't have the ashes, of the Para Aduma, we are all having of that Tum'ah. Right? And look at what's going on in this world. There's so much impurity, so much things that are pushing towards impurity, pushing towards things that, not just thoughts, even states and considerations and goals that are profoundly impure. Yet, how are you going to call HaKadosh Baruch Hu in those states? And that's what Avraham Avinu gave them. Now, on one hand, you have a pasuk in Sefer Shemot that tells you something quite strong that you can't, ignore, which says, ובכל אשר אמרתי עליכם תשמרו, ושם אלוהים אחרים לא תזכירו, לא יישמע על פיך. The names of those foreign gods shall not be even heard on your mouth. And yet, what are we saying? That Avraham Avinu gave to his children a way, not just a way, a Shem, a name, to refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a state of Tumah. And you know what this tells you? This tells you that actually there are all ways by which the children of Avraham Avinu that were sent to the east have been referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that are not Shemot of Elokim Achad. Now, without a tradition, it would be hard for you to actually know what that can be. And actually, seriously, with all that you have access in Torah, and that's what mentioned in those 5 sessions, it's not that you really need that. Yet, this week, the parasha mentions those 72 Shemot of Torah. And I'm going to tell you something which I think is a fascinating relationship. You have 72 names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you have 72 heptatonic scales. 72 scales made of 7 pitches that go ascending and descending. And that's not just a tradition, it happens to be a later tradition of what's called classical Indian music. But it's only a later tradition, it's just a classification. It's something you can call mathematical, because it's just a matter of, you know, number of the configurations you can have those pitches, those notes, those musical notes. And you actually have a beautiful correspondence between the 72 names you have in this parasha, the parasha Beshalach, with those 72 scales. And if you would be interested, I could even give you a set of different scales that in a way could be candidates for what we cited in the very first session, versus first lecture or series of lectures, which was about the melody, the tune that the Kohanim, that the Levim were employing for the Kohanim to be able to cause the swallowing of the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu inside this melody. And you see, I won't disclose here any what you could consider as foreign name that actually would have been used by the children of Abraham Avinu as they went to the east and still be able to prefer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But on the other hand, having musical notes, having musical scales, and relating to them, and having a sense of them, and a sense of how you could actually accompany your way of addressing HaKadosh Baruch Hu through those musical notes. What can be wrong with that? I plan on giving you, on giving to Rabbi Yirmiyahu Levitas to give a set of the rest of the notes of what we have. And I will give you there actually a scale. It's a beautiful scale to work with. And it has an ascending and a descending. And obviously, it's not me in my presence as a man here, but it's a nice thing for you, I think, to actually relate to those pitches, and relate to that, you know, the music that goes with it, and to even know to improvise with it, and to use it to address a couple. And the last note now is we really saw 3 main matters. The first one is that there was such a thing as musical skills being used by the Levim to help the Kohanim have their utterance marry that music. And I'm just telling you now, as in the last session, that actually this is related. It is actually related to the matanot that Avraham Avinu gave. The second thing we saw, which is really a fundamental matter, is that the Shemot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to use in a proper setting, in a proper way, in matters that correspond to, you know, to the holiness that is theirs, of Shemot Elokim. And so we saw conditions, you know, not, I mean, being humble, never being angry. And since this is the reason why I gave you this lifum sa'ara agra, because this is exactly at the opposite of the conditions. That is, that's when you're angry. That's when things are difficult for you. That's when your pride plays with you. That's when everything is going wrong your way. And that's why inside there, you actually do not have any of the Shemot Elokim. Yet, they're here to replace that. They're here for you to utter those letters. Lefum Sa'ara Agra. I could go into many details about why you can actually activate something with it. But that was the teaching of Ben Hehe, the Mishnah. And that is not to take at a time where you're trying to, in adoration to Akash Baruch Hu, in praising Akash Baruch Hu, Lefum Sa'ara Agra is not that. Lefum Sa'ara Agra is when you are in the pit of the troubles, of the things going wrong, of things being difficult. At that point, you pronounce this. And the third thing I humbly gave you was what we mentioned last week, is knowing to visualize, to think, to meditate on Elokim de Alefin, Aleph, Lamed, Pe, Lamed, Mem, Dalet, He, Aleph, Yud, Wav, Dalet, Mem, Mem, and to say Elaha de Meir. There could have been many other things we could have mentioned. Many other things. But I can tell you one thing, is that a lot of what we mentioned here is for you to not only grow in trust with Hakadosh Baruch Hu, in the sense of V'yiftechu becha yodei shemecha, but you have to see that this matter of having Shem Elokim, having a role for you, is something that you have in many parts of our Jewish practice, including Birkat Kohanim. What do we say? Samu et shemi, and they will put my name, al bnei Israel. U'ani avarechem, and I will bless them. See, Shmot Elokim is not about trying to play the apprentice sorcerer who thinks that he's got himself this little shortcut using some Shem of Hakadosh Baruch Hu. It's a privilege of noble inheritance. You have received till today a link to Oraita, a link to Torah, a way to pray, a way to relate to your difficulties and have Hakadosh Baruch Hu included in it. And Shmot Elokim, again or not, it's not that little shortcut. It's that privilege of your connection. And it's allowing that connection, whether it's through Lefum Sa'ara Agra, things of difficulty, or whether it's through what David HaMelech Chai V'Kayam mentions in many other ways, and I could have cited. It would have taken many more in 5 sessions. To all the time that he mentions the concept of Shem, the concept of name of Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
I look at that quote Shemar's figure, which we really it has that clarification. And yours has a really and I wonder Elohim is how can I use this name while I'm thinking, expressing anger?
First, when you have anger, you're not going to go into the matters of Elokim Dalef. You're not going to go into matters of Elohim when you're angry. What I told you is this exactly the reason I gave you those two things that are complementary. When you are in more to a matter like of more anger, of difficulty, of where you actually, you would rather, though it's frankly it's a ridiculous gesture, but you have those people that like would raise their fist toward the heavens, But when you have this difficulty, that's exactly for what Lefum Tzara was. And Lefum Tzara, good luck in trying to express it in question of chesed and question of gvura. It's nor this nor that. Actually, if you would want to understand what Lefum Tzara is about, it's all what we call amuda in Tzfat. It's all about something which is totally in the middle. It's about receiving from up what is yours to receive that will solve that problem. So on matters when there is anger or there's anything which is difficult like that, for sure it's not something for the Elaha de Meir Aneni. No, it's not for that. But the Elaha de Meir Aneni is for something even more real and more, I would say, even pungent. It's something which is actually working. But you're not going to do that at the point, as you said, when you're angry, which is the reason why I gave you the Lefum Tzara. The Lefum Tzara, it's for that point where it's going wrong, and you would not even address HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As I told you at the point I mentioned this on the second lecture, my master was even saying, instead of swearing, I'm not swearing personally, not naturally, but there are people that swear when it's wrong. So he was saying, instead of swearing, put all your anger on those letters. Say, Lefum Tzara with a lot of anger, and there's no problem. Say it. There's some people that they would say all kind of terrible names, all kind of stuff, that comes out of their mouth, really impure stuff. In order to kind of, I don't know what they're trying to do. In a way, they're trying to reject or like relate with this difficulty they're having. Instead of that, you know what? Use this. It's extraordinary. There's no Shmot Kodesh inside there. It's only you could say a concept of saying according to the difficulty is the reward. But take it out with all which is wrong in you. And take everything which is wrong in you out with those letters. Really, take it all out. But at the point that you really need help and you're not down there, that's where you have the Elaha de Meir Aneni.
When we say this, also in the Macabbi, Hashem didn't make miracle for Israel, but he punished them three by doing the miracle. So when, let's say, there's a punishment against the goal, Hashem not doing. We don't want to lose marriage.
Well,
we do it for 40, Hashem.
That's exactly why, precisely why the Mishnah told you who said Lefum Tzara Ben Hihi, Ben Haolam Hazeh, Ben Haolam Haba. The Ben Ishrai says that's the reason it's called a God. Why? Because he actually is benefiting from Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh. You see, the matters we have in the Gemara a few times about miracles and trying to avoid them is because of saying, well, if you actually take of that, it's going to take away from Olam Haba. You're going to benefit from something which was not really yours normally in Olam Hazeh. You take it away from Olam Haba. You have the story about Rabbi Yirmiyahu Levitas, and all those matters. But it goes deeper than that. There's a way to actually benefit from what is yours as a son and daughter of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of saying, hey, I'm in this difficulty. It's for you to take me out. Right? Because if not, I'm going to tell you that you would have, it's a very bitter experience. So people are there, they're in a great difficulty. They know that the difficulty is such that you can only have it through a miracle, but on the other hand, they don't want a miracle because that miracle will take away from their marriage. So what do you want? You just want to have it bitter and hard and just keep it like that because that's why you're certain to keep your marriage. It's not the way, that our sages wanted that. That's the reason it was said. Okay. Ben Olam Hazeh, Ben Olam.
This might be a whole answer, I don't know. But can you address something why it goes from 72 to 63 to 45 and then jumps back up to 52. It seems like we're descending, going, more into form and more away from light. And why does it jump back up to 52?
There are two reasons to that. Two obvious reasons to that. The first one is that 52 is about Malchut, which is a separate concept from any of the Ab, Sag, and Ma, that themselves are about HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Because they're masculine?
Yes. So it's about, so they're of a different nature. And there's a different that can actually jump. Because they're different nature. And in a way, Malchut, as we know from, that's one of the secrets of Megillat Ruth, Malchut contains all the rest of the Sfirot above. That's the idea. That Malchut contains back. It's like some self-similar structure. It contains back the whole. So obviously, the last name had to be bigger than the previous name. Because it's receiving everything. So it had to contain at least. So it had at least to be bigger than 45.
Because it's gestating and birthing something, reflecting something bigger back.
Exactly. So it needed to have more. And what does it have more? What do you have between 45 and 52? 7. Which is for the 7 Sfira, which is Malchut. That's all. So that's the first answer. The second answer is that actually the whole picture of Av Sag Ma Ben is a very beautiful picture, which is actually corresponding to what? It's actually corresponding to Etz HaChaim. You see, if you take Etz HaChaim, it has a gematria of 233. If you take Ab Sag Ma Ben, it has a gematria of 232. But in all the texts, we always say Ima Kolel to get 233. So people say it's because of Regel, which has a gematria of 233. But it's because it's Etz HaChaim. But you know why it's like that? Because actually you have two main forces of what creates the abundance of this world from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which we call Mazala Ilah and Mazala Tzfat. Without going into all the details, you have one name which is called Ab and one which is called Wenake. Wenake is the last of the 13 midot, right? And Ab, Shem Ab, is the first of the Shem. And Ab corresponds to 72, and Wenake corresponds to 161. But look at Etz HaChaim. Et corresponds to 160, and Achaim to 73. Just have this one between them. Or it's considered as 73 and 160, or it's 72 and 161. And that corresponds to essentially what the Etz HaChaim is. Those are three, in a way, structures, Ab Sag Ma, and then this feminine structure, which is called Ben. But that's much beyond what this does. Okay. Thank you.
It's a beautiful last thought. Thank you so much. Yeah, very much. Really enjoyed your presentation. Very unique idea. Thank you. Thank you. So the most amazing shiur I ever had in my life. I don't know how much my brain took it in, but my neshama definitely did. So much.
Actually, should have kept my jacket. Actually, this was quite cold today. No?
What they're doing
Everybody pop out and
do you have any interest in teaching anywhere else with the Tzfat? Do you have time?
Well, at the moment, it's situation where we're supposed to come out of our home at the end of January.
Where you live now. Is you know,
Now we're going to have
you
I would like to stop the recording. She did stop the recording, so I don't even know how do you actually stop this?
I think I know how to do it.
it's happened to me before.
It also happened.
Really embarrassing.
All right, I thought I turned it off, but it doesn't
I
seem to.
was teaching at the undergrad.